As Hank Dearden with ForestPlanet, giving a big shout out to our friend Corinna B from Care More, Be Better. Care More, Be Better is a sustainable social impact and regeneration podcast. Corinna plants one tree for each new subscriber or follower to Care More, Be Better podcast or newsletter. Right now we're visiting one of our planting sites and thought we'd show you some trees. Many thousands of trees have been planted to date, and we're grateful for the support. So it's Hank with ForestPlanet. Again, we're back here in Pangani and things are looking pretty good. These trees you see behind me were planted about a year ago. So the P8 planting site is actually really pretty big. It's almost 200 hectares, lots of different pieces of it. And we have to have the different strategies in different areas because the soils are different in different spots. Parts of the P8 planting site are close to the Pangani River, which is about 100 yards that way, so that reliably tidal flow comes up here. And these are red mangroves. They're surviving really well, but with a little help from the trenches.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Corinna Bellizzi.
Hello and welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the planet and want to build a better, brighter future. Today's guest is one of my favorite collaborators. Thanks to our partnership with forestplanet.org, we've committed to fund the planting of 24,832 trees this year alone. And we're just getting started. Every subscriber to this podcast or our newsletter helps make this happen. Hank Dearden III is the founder and executive director of forestplanet.org, a 501c3 nonprofit that supports large-scale, low-cost reforestation projects across the globe. Since 2018, they've planted nearly just over 2 million trees, all for just 15 cents a tree on average, with an emphasis on planting in regions where the trees will do the most good for local ecosystems and communities in peril. Today, we'll dive into the power of mangroves, the impact of reforestation, and the beauty of building global partnerships that get to work to build a better, brighter future for all people. Wow. With that, Hank Dearden, welcome to the show.
Thank you very, very much for having me. It's great to be a guest once again.
Yeah, I know when we last connected on this podcast, I think you were approaching the 1 million mark. And so that's where I kind of stumbled in your intro, but you shared with me just before we started recording that you've crossed that 2 million hurdle and things are accelerating. So that's really lovely to see, in a small part from our collaboration too.
Absolutely. We can't do it with people like you, and things are really starting to pick up.
So let me just ask you my first starter question here. For those new to our collaboration, could you talk about what inspired you to start ForestPlanet?
Yeah, thanks. My background has always been in business development, sales, marketing of stuff, but I have an engineering degree in more systems theory where we studied how things work together and the complicated things that work together. But then as a personal passion, I care about the little speck that we all live on, little green marble. And, and then I just kind of love trees. I had an ad agency for a while. I was involved with business development and sales of fairly complicated things, semiconductors, websites, speech recognition technologies, more consultative sell, in my experience. And then I hooked up with another NGO. It was about 20 years ago, frankly, that was planting trees. And they talked about the agroforestry model, which is a very systemic approach and highly integrated, where you're not just planting trees, you're intercropping, you're planting, as you would say, trees at 3 level. It's not really, frankly, about carbon, even though that's why a lot of people are motivated to support the organization. And carbon is being sequestered, but it really is about economic development. Dad was a social worker, and so in terms of community development and service. That's kind of like baked into my DNA anyway. So I understood what they were doing, and it kind of really sort of like brought everything together, that really what was needed was a higher level of awareness about how intricate these kind of systems are, but how powerful and resilient they are as well, and the benefits that they can deliver, quite frankly, for not a whole lot of money. So the thing about being an engineer is you want to solve a problem, and you come in and it's a big, complicated problem. It's got a lot of different moving parts. Everybody's got their hair on fire running around. So your first thought is, okay, where can we apply the least amount of pressure and get the biggest bang for the buck? Leverage is the magic word. And as I was looking at things, things kept coming back to the trees in terms of being the point of an inverted pyramid, where if you want to check a lot of boxes and solve a lot of problems, trees are the best way to do it. And I would submit that if you go around the world and look at, all the plethora, if you will, of societal problems, pick one, start pulling the rope a little bit, pull the string, and you're going to run into deforestation fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And how it really does impact. I mean, we wrote a blog about how trees help prevent wars in terms of their economic development and their economic support and their natural resources, and not just soil retention, revitalization for agricultural pursuits, but water. Really, it's the impact of trees on the water cycle may be more significant than the impact of trees on the carbon cycle.
Yeah, that's where we talk about desertification, right? Like when you remove trees, you essentially create desert conditions.
You start down that path. Soil is got organic, good soil. As I say, soil's alive, but dirt's inert. Dirt's just dead. Soil has, certain amount of organic material in it, of course. But the other thing it has in it is air, where there's space for air to come down and water to trickle through. Tree roots are great at creating that kind of space and creating that air for water and air and oxygen and CO2 to be absorbed by soil as well. So when you take that away, you're kind of taking away that catalyst, and you better put something in there that sort of delivers that same kind of overall benefit, or it's just a matter of time.
Now, you've also described your path as a journey to fulfillment, your personal ikigai, as we could call it. Ikigai is a Japanese word that really means you're living your life at the intersection of your desired skills and purpose, right? So how did that lead to this work, this pursuit?
Well, I mean, maybe it was unconscious, or that I just sort of did it. I mean, I was in my late 50s before it sort of dawned on me that I had to put all these things together, and fulfillment means different things to different people, and people get fulfillment from different places. Okay. And there's plenty of people who do a job, they're good at it, they more or less like it, it feeds their family, and that's fine. But maybe they don't really get a fundamental fulfillment from their job, and that's okay. They get their fulfillment other places. They get it from their family, their church, their community, their passions, singing in the choir, fishing with the guys, whatever it is that they want. So they have if you will, like a church and state there. There's things I got to do during the day to keep alive, and I go through it. And sure, it's important. God love them, the people who are the mechanics for buses. Are they personally fulfilled by that? Maybe not. And, and that's okay. It needs to be done. They do a good job, and I hope they're well paid, because it's necessary, and cast no aspersions whatsoever. But I'm wondering if they're personally fulfilled by it. I'm going to guess that they're not, and then they get their fulfillment somewhere else, and that's fine. And they have a well-rounded life, and they're happy, and life's good. And I wish them every happiness and great success. And it sort of dawned on me that my fulfillment has to come from my job, right? And maybe I have the luxury because don't have the spouse and don't have the kids, and I can hold out, if you will. I don't have to, make those kinds of choices. But for me, it's sort of like the Venn diagram where fulfillment is the middle of the 4 circles. And the 4 circles for me are you're good at it, you like it, it's important, and it makes you money. And it gives you, a living. So where those 4 integrate in the middle, overlap in the middle, for me, that's fulfillment. And I'm insanely grateful to all the gods that you can name and a bunch that we can't, that I've got maybe 3.2 out of 4 right now. So the money's starting to come in, and we're starting to deliver. So I hope that answers that question. But it didn't really dawn on me that that's correct.
I think this kind of focus on really finding that sweet spot in your life as much as possible, especially if you're somebody who might be that A-type so-called potential workaholic, like I'm guilty, right? I have thought a lot about that over the years. This is what has connected me to persistently staying in the natural products industry, because I know that my work is also producing good in the world. But what has led to the pursuit of this podcast? Because it brings me joy and fulfillment to be able to connect with other do-gooders like yourself, to be able to participate in the planting of all these trees. And, when I first built this plan with you, I thought we might be spending about $500 a month. And that $500 a month would plant, it's about 6 trees per dollar, just on average, maybe a little more than that. We'd be planting a significant number of trees. And I thought we would have a goal for the entire year of planting 20,000 trees. We crossed that mark in June. So I'm, both thrilled and also want people to understand who are listening today that I plant up to 4 trees per listener, because if you follow us on Spotify, on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to my newsletter on caremorebebetter.com, I've agreed to plant a tree. And so I do have some super users out there who have emailed me and said, I wanted to make sure that I'm being counted because I subscribed to your newsletter, I subscribed to Spotify, I did all these things. And I'm like, yes, I'm planting 4 trees on your behalf. Now, for last quarter, that investment is over $2,000, cash from my hands into yours to make sure that we plant all these trees together. And I mean, frankly, I'm thrilled with that. I'm hoping I can keep this going through the end of the year. And I'm lucky to have had a few of the sponsors who've come on the show over the past few months to be interviewed that are entrepreneurial. I recommend a donation, and so they've helped to cover some of those costs. But we mostly aren't monetized. I'm doing this show particularly because I want people to have access to the important information that we cover, to guests like you, who understand deeply that important work has to be done every day, that it's going to take more of us working in mission-driven ways to help preserve the future of our planet so that our kids and grandkids and all the wonderful species on this planet can survive and thrive. So I want to talk about mangroves.
Okay. And truly, thank you for your support. I wish that all the other podcasters would take a page, because, this stuff, obviously takes a lot of effort, but it takes a lot of bandwidth too. We're chewing up a lot of photons here. And you've got now up to 40,000 subscribers across all your platforms, which is amazing. Congratulations. I'm very jealous, and I'm very, very impressed. And to help us get the word out there. But, that takes a lot of energy.
Yeah. And if I only had the energy to also throw at social media. So the social media followership might be paltry, but, subscribers to the show, this is a long form content podcast. People pick it up all over the globe, dominantly in the US, but I even have some listeners in Tanzania where you're planting these mangroves.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what you're doing there in Tanzania. As I said, this year so far, we've supported 24,832 trees. 1 check is coming to you. And then at the end of next quarter, I'll send you more for the listeners who've come to the podcast. I want you to talk about why mangroves are so vital to those local ecosystems and to coastal resilience.
Sure. So in mangroves, I think, are the most incredible creatures in the world, I feel. And how we fell into this is that, just do a quick backup. The business model for ForestPlanet is that I do what I do, and other people on the ground around the world do what they do. And we come together and we focus on our respective strengths. So I do this. I have these types of communications. I have lots of events. I set up other corporate partnership arrangements, and basically just all day long, type A, like you say, work hard to make money. It's that simple, and get the word out. When it comes time to plant a tree, I partner with groups that are on the ground in their various communities. They're established. I vet them. I do background checks on them. I visit them, and I basically sub out. I don't tell them what to do. I ask them what they're doing or what they might like to do. They need to justify to me that what they're doing makes sense. They have to explain their model. And if you will, if I like it, then I buy wholesale. So the business model for me, quite frankly, is sell low and buy slightly lower. These folks on the ground know what they're doing. They just need more cash. And the Western dollar usually goes very, very far where the need is. Why Tanzania? Well, I didn't pick Tanzania. I didn't pick Africa. I picked a group that I found that really had their act together and really know what they were doing. They happened to be in Tanzania. And it's the Friends of Usambara Society, and they're up in the mountains. And we can talk about those projects, but a lot of those are more agroforestry, soil remediation, and water retention. Up in the mountains, Usambara Mountains are not far from Kilimanjaro in northeastern Tanzania, and not far from the cradle of our species, I truly believe. So it's really kind of an intense visit there to go see the biodiversity. Say, yep, this is where we came from. It's like a petri dish. And it's gorgeous. I highly recommend traveling there. But I had been working with this team for a while, a couple years, 20,000 trees here, 100,000 trees there, water resource trees, avocados, fruiting trees, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, I know that mangroves are really super important. Have you guys ever done a mangrove project? Could we find one? It's like, we haven't, but we want to, and we know the perfect place to do it. There's this town called Pangani that's on the Indian Ocean coast. It's about 100 miles from where they are. So it's the coastal regions. So different tribes, different cultural mix on the coast than it is inland. Quick sidebar, Tanzania was a German colony before the Brits took it over. So there's a lot of Lutherans there, but then on the coast, there's a lot of Muslims because the Arabs have been trading up and down the coast of East Africa for centuries. So Pangani is a little fishing village. There's a river there that actually has a pretty big watershed. It's called the Pangani River, and it runs upstream towards Kilimanjaro. So when it rains on the southern part of Mount Kilimanjaro, that water flows into the Pangani River and goes into the ocean at the town of Pangani, which is an ancient fishing village where they have these old fishing boats, the dhows with like the single sails that look pretty much like they did in the year 822 when they started using them. I mean, they're pretty amazing. They just float out with the tide in the morning and come back in the night. They're just amazing. So I started working with the Friends of Usambara Society on a mangrove project. We both really wanted to do it. We both really understand the power of the mangroves. On one hand, they sequester more carbon than any tree. When you're looking at the tree out your window right now, you're looking at about half of it because what's above the ground is half and what's below is the other half in terms of roots. When you look at a mangrove tree, you're looking at a third of it. So because even if it's like 50 feet tall, that means there's like 100 feet down and the root systems are super deep. These evolved right in coastal or tidal regions. They're one of the few, if not only, I believe, trees that can survive in salty or brackish waters. The root systems are very dense. They hang on to shorelines. They're very tangled. They're not pretty to look at in one sense, but they're incredibly gorgeous because they're just life gone nuts, in my hand. The root system, because the tides come in and out, the water levels rise and fall. The root systems in some instances look like they're on stilts. And that is the perfect breeding ground for all kinds of crabs, fish, shrimp, everything at the bottom of the marine food chain. Each tree, if you will, it's its own little mini estuary. As I say, if you want fish in the ocean, then you put mangroves on the shore. What else? They flower, so the honey can be harvested from them. It's a very rich, dark, no messing around African type of honey. It's pretty intense. I got some back. I have to only eat just a little bit at a time because it's not this light, clear, pretty, foofy clover honey that we're used to. This is the real deal.
Well, maybe you can send me some as well. I would love to try it.
Oh, yeah. So it should. What? So, yeah, I mean, it checks a lot of boxes. And especially if you're a fishing village like Pangani, where they've seen fish populations over the past 20 years drop by 80% in some ways. Now, I honestly don't know why. I need to find out what's going on there. It might be temperature. It might be pollution from the Pangani River coming down, pesticides, herbicides, all kinds of shenanigans going on. But right there, they had a problem with, quote, encroachment, where a lot of trees had been cut down because the good news, bad news about them is because they have salt in them, you can build your houses and your huts out of them. And the presence of the salt keeps away the termites. And it also is perfect wood for making boats, the fishing boats as well. And also it burns pretty well, even if it's green because of the salt in it. So there are chunks of Pangani where there had been, quote, encroachment, and it kind of laid bare what used to be, mud, and some of those areas have clay in it. And once that gets exposed to the sun, it got baked. It's like you're walking on asphalt. It's horrible. It's all cracked and it's full of salt because the water evaporates. It doesn't permeate. It doesn't get down in. So it's not going to naturally recover. Human beings cause this problem. Human beings have to fix it. So the first thing I said is, okay, do the locals still cut down the trees? Have they gotten the memo that thou shalt not? And they go, oh yeah, no, there's a big now almost vigilante is too strong a word, neighborhood watch, if you will, where no one is allowed to cut down, at least clear cut the trees. Now, every now and then you can cut down an old one here and there, single, and get together and figure out how you want to divvy it up. That's okay. Just don't clear cut. And then, when you cut one down, you make sure that you plant another 100 or so because they're so cheap to do.
Well, and not every tree will survive through to, become a large, beautiful mangrove either. So, that's the reality of any tree planting endeavor. When you see people cutting down pine trees and then going to replant new ones in a new site, right? They're planting probably 3 to 4 times the number of trees that they plan on harvesting in the end, because some of them will simply not take root for one reason or another.
Exactly. And then mangroves are tricky because you do have issues with the tides, and that's a function of river level. You want the tide water to go far enough inland. If in the dry season and during a neap tide, the tides don't reach that far from the banks of the river. So hydrology is an issue, and you have to get kind of creative about channeling and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, mangroves are tricky, but they're worth the effort. They're super beneficial. So my friends at FOU, Friends of Butte and Bar Society, say, okay, we'll work with you on this. And that's great. And I went out and I got a grant, and God love the folks at the Palmer Foundation took a risk on us, and we went through and we learned and we made big mistakes. We did a lot of things wrong. And now we've fixed those mistakes. And in this one area around Pangani in Tanzania, I was just there in June. Actually, we started this 3 years ago. So I've been there 5 times, 5 trips, lots of Sturm and Drang, spent about $100,000, sourced from wonderful people like you. And it's been kind of our tuition. But right now there's 400,000 trees there that are, for the most part, looking really strong. Some didn't make it in some areas, but we know what we did wrong there because it's just too hard pan and too much salt density, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, one of the things I've heard about mangrove forests in particular is that when, like you've mentioned, you get an area that gets really dry and cracked like that often too, it's tricky because drainage becomes a problem. And so the rootstocks can go septic. And, one thing that may be true of mangroves, yes, they're very resilient when it comes to brackish water and things along those lines, but they really do need drainage in and out. And if water isn't coming through, like fresh water in one capacity or another, then they can actually get root rot, which you wouldn't think would happen because, hey, you've got really deep roots, right? So it's just not as simple as taking that hard-baked kind of clayish earth and shoving a tree in there. You need to also work on the drainage and make sure, like you said, that the salt isn't too prevalent, which can happen when you've had a lot of water sitting on an area and then it all evaporated. Now you have just a lot of salt basically sitting in that top layer, right?
Basically, you have the Dead Sea, correct? Yes.
A dry Dead Sea.
A dry Dead Sea, yeah. You get salt flats. So, and initially we were just doing it just to do it because that's the mission of ForestPlanet. And we've been learning a lot and the Friends of Usambara Society, again, these are like, we'll call them the hill people. And, they had to sort of adjust to different cultural / let's just call it work ethics of the coastal people, those tribes. We're sorting that all out. It's just hotter there. And when you're out there and it's in the rainy season, like I was there in June. Actually, let me back up. I was there in February, which is like their August, and it was definitely a dry season because they're just below the equator. And it was hot. It was miserable. Tide's not coming in that far. And it's like you're walking in some of these areas and it's like crunch, 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 right? But I was very psyched to see, that some of the trees that we planted with trenching that had the drainage that exactly what you were talking about, were looking good because they'd been planted a year before. And I'd planted them, we had planted them in let me get my numbers right, 2024, about 15,000 of them as a test of the trenches in a particular area. And they got outplanted, but no one had visited there and gone out there because it was pretty far from town. It was tough to get through. And frankly, I ran out of money for people to go out and pay them to monitor the stuff. So they were left to their own devices. We just handed over, here you go, nature. And it was in February, I was almost in tears. I came back and we're talking still like 95% survival rates because we had set the ball rolling in the right way, fine. And that was where like nature is, okay, thanks, Hank. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Corinna. We'll take it from here, right? So that was awesome to see. I mean, just a little bit of care and feeding because, tide comes in and out and in and out. And sometimes it undermines the soil underneath the tree. Little eddy gets in there, I don't know, the hydraulics of it, whatever. So the tree is alive, but it's lying on its side. The roots are going in and it's flat on its side. It's about 14 inches, and the top of it is this bright green leaves. And they're like, yeah, we're good, we're alive, but could you prop me up a little bit? And I'm like, oh yeah, sure. So dig a little deep hole and prop it all up, and and they're like, okay, thanks, bye, cheers, see you next year. And I'm like, yeah, that was easy. But even with that, it was great to see. So, but what we did end up doing to really make it all work was they did in the mountains, bless you, was nurseries. And that's a little bit tricky because you do it a certain way in the mountains, and then we were doing it in a certain way, and frankly, those rocked. So on our website or on our social media are some where you put the nurseries, and where you put the nurseries are under the mature trees really close to the shoreline. So they're pretty much guaranteed that during dry season, rainy season, neap tide, spring tides, they get their drink of water. And then they're protected by the mature trees in a couple of ways that are actually really quite moving. But what we had started last year and what I visited when I saw them in February of this year, 400,000 beautiful little 12-inch, 13-inch trees all lined up like croquettes, all, like, okay, we're good. We're here. We're ready to get put into the field. And I just like, it was quite moving. I got to say, I was just very impressed. So then what? Then we had the funding then to get them into the field because then you got to time it with the rainy season. So at that part of the world, the rainy season starts late March. So to get things flushed out, exactly what you say. So it's rain, it's getting down, it's getting rain from the sky, it's getting that fresh water. The river levels go up, which means the tide levels go up. So it's like a 1-2 punch. It's getting water from all directions, which is exactly what they need. And then when you're doing it, you're taking it from a nursery. So the nursery, you've got a little tube that's about 8 inches long and a diameter of about 2.5 inches, maybe 3. And that's full of soil. And there you've got to fix your soil. So you got sand, soil, and a little bit of manure. So the tree is growing in that tube. That's its ecosystem. So when you outplant the tree, you outplant it with its soil tube. Obviously, you got to cut away the plastic, and that's another discussion, what to do with all that. So basically, okay, I'm going to take you away from home, but I'm going to take you with your friends. I'm going to put you in a new home, but with the friends. And by that time, you've got all kinds of microbes and bugs and everything crawling around in the soil. Because every day when the tide comes in, it brings, brackish water, but it brings a lot of nutrients with it. Dead fish, fish poop, whatever. There's all kinds of organic material that just gets washed in.
They produce nitrates, they need that too, NPK.
You got it. And it's all right there. So when you outplant, this time when we outplanted the tree, we outplanted it with its soil that it was born in. And then that started in late March when I was not there. And let me tell you something, pal, that's hard work, because the top level of that hard pan, again, it's full of a lot of clay. When it gets wet, you can kind of feel like the asphalt, if you will, about 1 inch or 2 down. But the top 2 inches is heavy African mud, right? It's got a lot of clay in it. When you just walk through it, oh yeah. And so it sticks to your feet, and you're walking around with leg weights.
Can picture it like the shoes that are just engulfed in clay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It's like I look down, I'm like, do I have snowshoes on? I mean, it was that, am I got pizzas down there? What the heck? And obviously you can't bring your car that close because mud, right? So you have to walk maybe a half a mile through that just to get to the spots where we're planting the trees, right? But this is what people have to do all day long, God bless them. And they did it. And when I was there in June, it was still the end of the rainy season, and there was still a lot of mud, and half of it was on my feet. It's incredible. But they looked amazing. Again, a couple of spots, too saline, too hard, frustrating to see 10 or 20,000 dead trees. I'll tell you right now, but unbelievably amazing to see 350, 360,000 very live ones that frankly kicking ass. So, I was very happy about that. Yeah.
The nursery is hosting something like as many as 300,000 trees that they're growing as seedlings or saplings at a time, right?
Correct. I mean, you can define your nursery. So we had 2 nurseries that was for this one particular project, but they were right there, and they can get pretty dense. And you put them in beds that could be like 1 meter by 6 meters. And so you can walk between the rows and, double check on them. And, because a lot of times the tide will roll in and some sticks will come in, and the seedlings are so small when they're only 1, 2, 3, 4 inches, a stick will damage them. So human beings have to literally just walk around and pick up the sticks and, keep them free so they can see all that. And all of this is happening underneath the mature trees. So you clear out space. And here it's really gorgeous because the leaves of mangrove trees are very, very small. I mean, if you put your thumb and your forefinger together like an AOK, that's about how big they are, which means that light can filter down. And this is how it evolved. You get enough light down for photosynthesis to kickstart, and the babies are growing fine, but not too much, so you don't get too much bare spots and too much intensity like you were talking about, and too much evaporation, leaving too much of a salt residue. So, they've been around for a while, and it's a perfect machine, So the mature trees are protecting the babies, and that's a very moving sight as well.
Now, I want to talk about some of the things that you've done to engage community and technology for impact. You've hosted everything from stadium fundraisers to online film screenings. What are some of your favorite campaigns, the sorts of things that you've done to raise funds to produce more effort?
So, I mean, you know what? My favorite ones are the ones that work. I mean, I love them all. I mean, we have in-person film screenings, and those are fun because you get to engage people. And anytime anybody asks questions, I just feel honored and excited to talk about it. The virtual ones, when they work, are great. Working with DC United here a few times. I mean, those are fun too. You're talking to people and you get to see a soccer game. So there's nothing wrong with that. We have, there is a thing called Professional Ultimate Frisbee. You might not be aware of it, but it is a league and it's been around.
That started in Santa Cruz. I'm here. So.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Right. So our DC team is the DC Breeze, and they've got a big playoff game this Saturday, and go Breeze. And I know some of the owners from a former life, and I just going out and see it, got to chatting and say, oh, well, we can plant a tree with every ticket, and frankly, what they did is they snuck up the price of their ticket by 15 cents and no one noticed and no one cared. And they're up to, I should have checked, tens of thousands, well over 10,000 trees. They've been doing that since 2018.
That's great.
So it's those are fun games. And again, I get to talk to people. So it's like, as I say, you know what? You can have your cake and eat it too. If A, you're really willing to work hard, B, work smart, and B, don't get too greedy about the size of the cake, right? You can do all these things at once, but you got to plan ahead. And then speaking engagements are starting to pick up. I spoke at one of the Unitarian churches. They had a lay-led service a couple of weeks ago here in the DC area. And that was an honor to get up and do about a 12-minute little mini TED Talk. I can't do too many of those.
Have you done a TED Talk?
Now that I've got the video for it, I'm going to be applying. Some of the TED folks, I want to say, listen, you're doing a big TED with 15,000 people someplace. Why don't you plant a tree for each one, just like DC United did, or an Ultimate Frisbee guy, and sneak up your ticket by 15 cents and no one will notice. And then yes, I'm happy to do my 12, 13.3 minutes, whatever your segment sizes are. So that's a product, if you will, that I was starting to sell and starting to push. And then the pandemic, just wiped out all events for a while. But now I'm coming back and going back to event organizers and trying to get them to sort of pick up on that. So I can go to the event and enjoy the event, but also, generate funds to do what we do.
Yeah. Well, what I can say too is that a lot of times you have these ideas that kind of come together and converge. What happened for me, I have hosted this podcast now for, 4.5 years, right? And one of my earliest guests was this woman who started a charity called Buy One, Give One. Mayumi Seiko, I think is her name. I might have that spelling pronunciation slightly off, so I'll share a link with show notes. But she came up with this concept that you could have any action within a business that did just a little bit of good. Like maybe it was donating 5 cents per email that your team sends, or something like that. Sends. But you pick something that you do. Maybe every invoice you process, you tack something on. And so for every action of a particular type, that you might make a small donation to a particular charity. And it was through thinking about that earlier episode on Buy One, Give One, and what you're doing, understanding that the cost can be managed to be something relatively low, that I came up with this idea of saying, well, what if I was to plant a tree for every new follower this year? And I feel like that has been a very inspiring thing for me. Like I've actually had members of community who wanted to make sure that they had those 4 trees planted in their name. And, perhaps I've just spent 60 cents for that one follower and I feel good about it, right? They feel good about it. And perhaps they spread the word too, so that impact can become greater and greater with time. And I think if more businesses were to look at their charitable contributions in this way, they could inspire greater engagement on the part of their follower base, their consumers. Now, I'm just in media here trying to get the word out about the guests that I have on the show and the sorts of social and sustainable impact issues that we cover on this particular podcast. But if more businesses would do this, would take that impetus and say, oh, just beyond like taking my annual contribution, giving it to the same charity every year, what if I was to inspire my employee base and build a plan like this that could be engaged with something that might be relatively low cost, but for each action, you have something come through. Maybe that's a ticket sale. Maybe that's a send of an email or an invoice. But it could be really anything that's relevant to the type of work that you do every day. And if in the case, like me with this podcast, I'm making a quarterly contribution that reflects those numbers, and I'm very transparent with you, I share those numbers. I mean, it's just a no-brainer to me. Like, why don't more businesses engage this way? And why don't they then also share that story with their audience so their audience can be compelled with a little bit of that feel good within their whole vitality and their personhood? Anyway, it's my pulpit for the day, I think.
Your voice to all their ears. This is how I spend my day. And, it's a challenge. I have to demonstrate that I know what I'm doing, that the trees actually get planted and we're not just taking their money. And that's fine. We're still new, but, we're picking up speed and we're picking up case studies and we're picking up stories. And we're picking up more corporate partners to the point where we have a spirits company. They have a gin and they have a vodka and they add botanicals to it and they plant a tree with every bottle. So that's one. Believe it or not, I just signed up a company based in Germany and they sell condoms online. But, it's what it is. Everything's got a footprint. It doesn't matter what it is. And there's one company that I signed up that's based in Cleveland, of all places, and they make yard signs. So how many yard signs are out there all over this country, especially during election year, especially here in the D.C. area, that's for sure. And the vast majority of them end up in landfill. So they work their backroom economics such that they kind of bake it in. Now, one of the things, and certainly nowadays with the current and sort of political environment, I do think some of these companies are a little bit nervous about looking, hate to say it, but too woke, which is the dumbest term I've ever heard because no one can define it.
It's either good or it's bad. It depends who you're talking to. I know.
Exactly. And, and you even ask people who don't like it, well, what does it mean? And they just stand there and they look at you blankly. So one of the things that we're starting to see is like what they call green hushing, where companies are being green, and they're letting people know about it internally. So it's almost like an HR. The people that work there enjoy it. They feel good about their job. They feel good about what they do every day. And they might go in and they say, listen, okay, I have kind of like a boring, repetitive, not hugely inspiring job, but at least my company's planting 1 million trees a year. And I'm part of that. It's an HR thing as much as anything else. And then that company turns around and does not let their market space know. They do not use it as a market differentiation. And that's their choice. The trees get planted or maybe they let it slip here and there, but they kind of keep it, as they say, sotto voce or, below the voice, so to speak. They don't make a big noise out of it. They just do it.
Tell me you like opera without telling me you like opera.
Yeah, it's sotto voce. So yeah, there's all the different businesses. I mean, some business like the Sign Hero guy, it's like right there, front center. We plant trees, right? And we are targeting that particular website to more sustainability candidates, people who give a fig about the environment. And I think we know what color those candidates are. And I'm going to target out and say, hey, you're going to buy yard signs. If the price is the same and the deliverability is the same, why don't you plant trees? Why not? Why wouldn't you do this? So those are the conversations that you have to have. But even then, people have their vendors that they want to work with and they're familiar with, and it's tried and true. And this is one of those things: if it ain't broke, don't mess with it. Other people are a little more progressive and will take a risk. And we don't need a lot. So in terms of brand differentiation and making a statement, nowadays, you're frankly only appealing to a small fraction of the audience. In businesses, at least B2C, I mean, they want to go for the gray middle. I mean, they don't want to have their market segmented by politics. Look, everybody needs a condom. I don't care how you vote it. Everybody needs a yard sign. I don't care how you vote it. That's their business, and that's fine. And they're going to focus on all that. So what I try to do is some of the brands who do want to do just a little bit of good and want to have a good story, but do so in the right way. Yeah, to your point, it's easy to slip. Do you want to plant a tree with that? You want fries with that? You can kind of like slip it in, and then that's where my advertising and marketing experience kind of comes in. So those are the conversations that I love having with each different brand, and they have their own bespoke little approach to it, just like you did. And it's just that's fun.
Well, I didn't intend to talk about politics today, but you've introduced the topic, and I feel the need to, put a framework around this, because environmentalism should not be a political issue. Caring about planting more trees to preserve coastlines with rising seas and warming temperatures, trees help to monitor temperatures, to actually bring them down, that they are preserving those coastlines so that homes and communities aren't thwarted with just a constant erosion. There's a lot of really great things that come from this that truly are not partisan. This is not partisan politics. So I really think that this whole idea that something that is environmental is somehow woke and therefore bad from either side of the aisle is ridiculous. We just need to kind of dismiss those arguments, I think, right out the gates, because people tend to agree planting trees is a good thing. People tend to agree that, having cleaner air to breathe is a good thing.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you. But living here in DC, I hate to say, somehow I get invited to some of these conferences and they're just rabid, and I don't know what it is. So what I do try to say to the brands that I work with is that, look, innate in human psychology is a positive psychological, emotional, and physiological response to just looking at a tree. It's unavoidable. It's baked into our DNA. We like trees, okay? Yep. So I say just talk trees. And you can talk about the benefits of the trees and the roots and the soil and the water and whatever. What I do recommend, if you really kind of want to stay away from all this stuff, is don't talk carbon. Don't talk climate change. Just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Right? Because people will support me because it's interesting. It's sort of a juxtaposition. People will support us because of climate change. We're gonna give you money to get a bunch of these trees planted, these mangrove trees. But that's not why the trees are being planted. The local people in Pangani need livelihood. They need fish. They need their shorelines to not erode. They can't think about global stuff. And, frankly, 300,000, 400,000 here and there is, it's good. It's great. It helps. Not going to cure climate change. It is going to help the local economy in lots of ways that we discussed. And that's fine. So the donor has one intention and the recipient has another. And guess what? Who cares? The tree got planted.
No, I mean, really, the tree got planted. And if we have thousands of projects like this happening around the globe, then even if they are thinking and acting locally, the impacts are global.
Absolutely.
That's just a reality. So I love what you're doing. I really want to understand what's next for you, because you've crossed a major hurdle and having already planted over 2 million trees. What's next? Are there any new regions or project types that you're exploring in 2025?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked, because I got some big news here. So the next level is leveraging the mangroves that we've been planting, which, again, were paid for, and again, 400,000. So, and a lot of people were asking me a year or so ago, well, what about carbon markets? And I was like, yeah, these are dodgy things. I'm not so sure about them. They said, well, if you're already planting the trees, you could be leaving money on the table. So I'm like, okay, well, I got to do some due diligence here and check my gut reaction and look into it. And long story short, I think carbon markets can, if they're done right, I'm optimistic that they can help. What we found out right away was the 400,000 that we planted is too small to justify all the overhead and the paperwork and the this and that and the blah, 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 tending to it, turning that effort into some kind of fungible credit, if you will. But people were saying, well, what else you got that's bigger? And I was like, well, hold that thought. So when I was in Pangani last June of 2024, tinkering with the ones that we already were planting, we identified enough spots, additional degraded areas that amounted to 2,000 hectares, or roughly where 5 million trees could go, right? So that is called the Kukua project. That's Kukua. That's Swahili. It means plant. And I picked the word because it has 2 Ks in it, like Kodak. It's easy to remember. And there are developers now that want to work with us, and we have actually we're starting to have some pretty big meetings where investors will upfront fund the planting of millions and millions of trees, with the vast majority of the dollars going to the local people doing all the hard work that I was talking about, slogging around the mud and building the nursery, right? And then waiting 3 years and then registering those projects with the various verification organizations. And then that can be paid out, that they would say, okay, yeah, this is legit activity and this is a legit carbon credit. And it's over the course of the lifetime of the tree, which could be 25 or 30 years, depending on how you negotiate it. So everybody kind of wins in that regard. So the investor gets their money back. Now, what's happening is with the carbon markets, and again, I am no expert on this, so check me on all this kind of stuff, but I'm not stupid and I've been kind of paying attention that you can get carbon credits for doing lots of different types of activities, but the ones that what they call blue carbon or the mangrove credits are holding their value in the fair market environments where companies who do want to offset their business activities, who want to go net zero, fine, will pay the money, and a credit is a ton of CO2, et cetera, et cetera. So it's almost like a share in the New York Stock Exchange, if you will. So the excitement there is that the bottom line is that all the work we've done to date is kind of turned out to be our audition tape, if you will, that we can go to these carbon market developer folks and say, we cut our teeth on somebody else's money. We made mistakes on somebody else's money, and we learned how to do this, and here's our audition tape. And people take us seriously because, like they say, it's a mixed bag. Mangroves are tricky. They're tricky to work with. You really have to time things with the seasons and the tides and the moons.
But now you know what you're doing. You've cut your teeth on it, just as you
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why they're talking to us, and they're like, do you have a team that knows what you're doing? Yes. Here's our tape. Check it out. Mm-hmm. Do you have spots where you can plant them? Yes. Do you have permission to plant them? Yes. Are they registered with the government? Because every country is going to be different. So in Tanzania, you have to get these registered with the government, to which I say, yes, they will be registered in another week or so. And I'm like, this is what I've got. So what I really am looking for is a partner who will help find the funding to get 5 million trees planted, crank things up. And they're like, okay, well, we could find money to get 50 million trees planted. I'm like, well, hold that thought, because 5 million is 10x growth over what we've already done. So let's
start there.
Yes, ma'am. And we'll come back, and there's a lot more to do. So right now, I went into it with a lot of healthy skepticism, and I still have a lot of healthy skepticism, but sitting here and now, I'm starting to be a little bit more optimistic that carbon markets, not governments, could be a real catalyst. And actually, I'll take that back. Some of the people demanding carbon credits are governments, like the government of Sweden or Finland, balance things out. Norway, making trillions of dollars off petrochemicals, that hardly any of which they're using. So, but they recognize that they're contributing to climate change. And so how can we balance that out a little bit? And they're making an honest effort to tidy up after their party, so to speak. That's how I look at it. And that could really, truly crank things up a order of magnitude or two, like almost overnight. So I'm very excited about that potential, trying to stay calm.
Yeah, and big multinational companies are investing in these projects. I saw examples from Nestle as one key example, where they're trying to offset the emissions of cows that they use in all of their dairy products, right? So they've invested, I think, $7 million in an algae tech company and continue to do other work in that arena. So, if the big multinational companies are already looking to get to net zero, then this is absolutely going to remain mainstream, whether or not the U.S. requires this of its constituent companies.
Correct. And to date, it's voluntary to date, but I believe that if you are publicly traded and you have made claims that saying we are trying to get to net zero, the SEC is like, thou shalt get to net zero.
Yeah, and it's on your balance sheet, essentially. It's in your annual reports. It's there.
It affected your share price, so now you got to step up and deliver it. So I'm going to stay optimistic until this all blows up in my face, which could happen any minute, of course. But so far, so good. And, as I say, 3 years, $100,000, 5 trips to Tanzania, 1 trip to the ER once I got back, and then 3 face plants in the muds where it's so sticky and you just asshole, you just face plant, and they got to dig you out, and you're just covered with mud. That's the real deal. That's what it takes to get the credit at the table with these people and start to.
You should have shared those pictures. You needed to share those pictures.
I should have actually, but the thing is the camera was covered in mud too, so I don't mind it. Mind it. It was fun. It was a great trip.
Well, as we prep to close here, I want to ask you just a couple of questions. One, if you could leave our listeners with one simple call to action, what would it be? And 2, where can people go to get involved, whether that's donating, sponsoring a project, or partnering like we have?
ForestPlanet.org and join our mailing list. And then that's the second question. Your first question, the one thing to do is open my emails. Get the emails, opt in and open them, because in every email there's things that you can do. There's brands that we work with. There's lovely podcasts that we work with. There's sign companies. There's vodka companies. There's events that we're doing both virtual and in real life. So that's number 1 is open my email. And number 2 is join the email in the first place. So nice and simple.
That's great. So go to forestplanet.org, join your newsletter, and open them. Give them a read. I could say the same about your Care More, Be Better emails. Now, if there's a question that I didn't ask that you wish perhaps that I had, you can go ahead and ask and answer it. If not, a closing thought?
Closing thought is just thank you very much. It was a great conversation per usual. Really enjoyed being on your show. I enjoyed listening to your guests. And we're very, very grateful for your support. We really hope that other people that will follow your example. You go to the head of the class, kid. I really appreciate that. And thank you for having us once again.
Thank you so much for joining me today. To support Forest Planet and help reforest coastal ecosystems, you can do 2 things. First, follow this podcast on the platforms I mentioned, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, also, of course, on Spotify, and our newsletter at caremorebebetter.com. I'll plant 4 trees for you if you do all those things. Secondly, go to forestplanet.org, sign up for that newsletter, and consider donating $10. $10 of really planting something like 66 trees. This helps to restore that biodiversity. And if you did all of that, you will have planted 70 trees. So let's push this effort forward. Give Hank a little extra juice to keep this project flowing. Now, don't forget, every new subscriber, we're doing this. We've planted almost 25,000 trees so far this year, and I'm keeping this going as much as I can for 2025. With your help, we'll grow that number even more. So thank you, all of you, for being a part of this. Together, we are truly building a greener and more resilient future. Make it a great day.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.